And that's 2 weeks in a row that we went up live to Facebook within seconds of pushing the button. And so welcome to our summer Sunday series town halls. My name is Daphna Michelson-Janae, and I am the state representative for House District 30. Today we have incredible leaders in sustainability joining us on our town hall, and we're going to talk a little bit about the environment. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments if you're watching on Facebook, or hit the Q&A button if you're participating with us on Zoom. I'll start with Anita, and I'm going to ask everyone to just introduce yourself and talk not only about some of the things that you've done in sustainability and what you do and who you are, but why it matters to you. So Anita, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you so much for having me here, Representative, and I am honored to share this panel with the rest of you. Thank you, Sunny, and thank you, Felicia. So my name is Anita Seitz, and I am the Mayor Pro Tem for the City of Westminster, and I've been on Westminster City Council since December of 2013. And for me, sustainability is the reason I want to serve the community. It truly means to me making decisions today that do not take away or jeopardize the future environment, economy, or equity of my community. So it's making smart decisions in every single one of the levers that local governments touch. I am the former president of Colorado Communities for Climate Action. I think anyone who's been paying attention to the news in Colorado the last few days knows climate change is not something that's happening in the future. It's happening to us now. 100% of Colorado is in drought. We have 4 major fires, multiple high heat days. This is something that's impacting our community. And so, as we know, members, low-income families, communities of color are disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change. And as far as local government, they've been disproportionately impacted by decisions that didn't focus on sustainability. So whether that's economic enrichment in a community that allows all of us to benefit, whether that's the siting of different industrial next to homes. There's a lot of different decisions within the purview of local government that impact all 3 of those areas. Again, environment, equity, and the economy. And so that's, to me, really the power of local government, why I want to serve at this level, because we can have such huge impacts on people's lives. So everything from building codes to making sure that houses are energy efficient. The cheapest energy of all is energy you never had to purchase because your house stays cool or stays warm, to impacting our water supply planning. Are all things that we do at the local level. I'm excited to talk more about that later, but I will defer to the next person up.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Anita, for being here. And I met you for the first time when I was first running, and that was around 2014. Like, I feel like you had just gotten elected or something, or no, you filled the vacancy, didn't you?
I did.
That's right.
Yeah,
I remember it well. Okay, Felicia, please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and talking about why the environment matters to you.
Yeah, hi, I'm Felicia. I'm going to be a senior in high school this year at Denver South High School, and I'm also the co-president of Youth Sustainability Board, which is a nonprofit that is run by teens and was started by teens a couple years ago. And our mission is to engage, empower, and educate youth in sustainability. So we do this through a couple different ways. The main way is through school chapters. So these are clubs at different high schools around Colorado, in Denver, Fort Collins, and Jeffco, that are doing initiatives at their school to make their school more sustainable, having guest speakers, and really educating the members of their school and club around sustainability. And I am so passionate about sustainability, and it's so important to me because like Anita said, we're already seeing the effects of climate change, and I'm almost 18, I'm growing up, and it's really scary to think about a future where we don't know if there's going to be water. We're already in a drought, and really focusing on what can we do now to make changes that are going to help people around the world have a better future where water's available, food's available, and we haven't destroyed the earth.
Those are all very good reasons. And thank you so much for your work, Felicia. My daughter graduated from South High School, so very excited to have you here. Sunny, it's all you.
Hi, everybody, and happy Sunday. I'm Sunni Benoit. I am the current president of 350 Colorado, and I am also one of the team leaders for 350 Metro Denver. And our group is a grassroots group that's working to solve the climate crisis and transition to a sustainable future. And the biggest reason we do this work is because there is no planet B. We don't have any options. And if we want to continue to survive as a species, we need to correct the problems that we ourselves, in fact, have created. Most of the work that I do personally is organizing around legislative issues at both the state, local, and federal level. Currently, right now, we're heavily involved in just recovery efforts, and that is because not only the climate crisis, but also the pandemic, which has created a whole mountain of new problems, including unemployment and people in communities, especially those communities in high polluted areas that are more susceptible to complications from COVID. Most of our work focuses around what we call a Green New Deal and frontline communities and communities of color that historically have been most impacted by fossil fuel development and extraction and pollution, and are the most vulnerable part of our population. And our goal is to change all of that so the next 7 generations have this beautiful planet and this beautiful state that I have grown up in most of my life, and will continue to be able to enjoy it. And thank you so much for having me here today. And with that, I will turn it over to the next person.
Thank you, Sunny. Before I hand it over to Talia, Sunny, I have a question.
Yeah.
Where, and this is going to show an ignorance, I'm sure, but where is the 7 generation number coming from? Why is that focus on 7 generations?
I actually kind of just borrowed that from, I've been speaking with a lot of Indigenous people, and they look to the next 7 generations. And I've just been hearing it so much, talking with them about a lot of what they're going through on the reservations, not only through COVID, but also their own problems in dealing with the climate crisis. So I just sort of re-said that because it's been in my mind a lot. And I think it's a great way to look at it. You know, we've got 7 generations to protect.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm going to maybe borrow it from you borrowing it. Okay. So now I'm going to hand it over to Talia Richard Landy. Talia, introduce yourself and who you are, and then start off with the questions.
Thank you, Dafis. So hi, I'm Talia. I'm the intern coordinator. And so I've been organizing some of this town hall series, which has been amazing. I will be a senior at Cherry Creek High School this year. And I'm really just thankful all of you are here. It's really inspiring to see such a engaged and passionate group of people. So we're just going to start right off with the first question. And so hold on, let me pull up the questions. So our main focus originally is to start with, what do we think right now the state of Colorado can do to further the goals of sustainability? So let's just start with Anita.
So I have a feeling Sunny's going to want to talk a lot about this as well as is Felicia. There's a lot going on in Colorado this year, and it's hard. ask people to stay focused because of everything going on in the pandemic. But there is a lot of rulemaking. Governor Polis just on the 12th talked about his roadmap. So 2019 was an incredible year for the environment in Colorado. We had historic legislation that I'm very proud to have helped pass to work on climate. So not only are we setting aggressive climate goals, but we said we need to have an inventory. 181, we're changing the focus of the COGCC to go, the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission, for those who aren't familiar with it, to go from fostering the industry to regulating it. And there's rulemaking processes with that. There's opportunities. We've passed clean car standards, but now there's the opportunity for clean trucks, right? So there's a lot going on, and it's really easy in a pandemic and in an economic crisis to feel that this work is icing on the cake, and maybe we slow down and really just focus on the immediate. But I would actually challenge that assumption. I think this is the opportunity for Colorado to figure out, how do we build back in a way that more matches our values and ideally who we would be? And that is not to minimize the struggles that I know Representative Michelson, Janae knows all too well, with real constraints with our budget and really hard choices. But really trying to put that lens over every single decision we make as a state and as local governments to make sure we're investing smarter with our dollars and trying to make sure we're going in the right direction, and really holding ourselves to the fidelity of the goals that we passed in 2019, and aggressively trying to make sure that the rulemaking process, the way that we're attacking meeting our reduction goals, have some integrity and have some bite. I think we need to really continue to put the pressure on, because it is so hard right now with everything happening at the same time. In my own community, I know you were asking for the state, so I focus on two ways. I always try to push with, the privilege of my title right now. I try to communicate on behalf of my community what we would like to see the state partner with us in. But then I think to have integrity in that message, we have to be doing everything we can at the local level. So Westminster has doing our first greenhouse gas inventory, our first sustainability plan. We're working on participating in electrifying our fleet. We're also looking at ways that we enhance electric charging infrastructure within our city. Again, trying to improve the amount of the fidelity of building codes, so we have really energy efficient buildings. So really looking for all of those things that are within our jurisdiction that we can do to make a meaningful effort. And so those are all things that we're pushing at our level. Things like water resource planning, marrying that to your comp plan. So how your city is going to look. Are we going to have enough water? And let's make some hard choices in there. Are we going to have enough open space to allow us to, and then density in other areas? How do we build so that we're the most environmentally sustainable for our community? So it felt like a very long run-on question, but there's a lot we have to do. We have to keep the focus, and we have to keep the pressure. We have to give our representatives cover. And this last point, I think, is really important. Sunny talked about just transitions, and I think that is really important. We have to do all of our environmental work with an equity lens. We shouldn't allow the conversation to seem that environmental concern is a privilege, because it's not. But oftentimes we don't recognize the downstream hard choices that people will be faced with. So really keeping that equity lens, looking for just transitions in every area where we're asking for dramatic change, I think is our responsibility. And I think it actually furthers the conversation and allows for implementation and true buy-in from all members of our community. Sorry.
Thank you so No, that was a great answer. Very lots of stuff to think about. That's a great way to get us started. So thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem. Now we'll head right on over to Sunny.
Okay. I would just echo some of Anita's comments. But I think in the short term, one of the most important things that we can do right now is a moratorium on additional oil and gas permits, as well as stopping the expansion of oil and gas production across Colorado. I mentioned earlier that this pandemic has shown that people near those types of facilities are more susceptible to COVID-19 complications. In the long term, I would like to see Colorado transition to 100% renewable energy, transportation, and regenerative agriculture, and help us reach net zero substantially before 2050. 2050 has been used as a very popular cutoff, but that gives us a 50-50 shot or a flip of the coin chance of saving this planet. And us here at 350 members certainly don't want to take a chance on preserving our planet, and we would like to see that transition come sooner, like 2035 would be optimal, and hopefully we could reach that type of goal. We would also, I think, going back to the just transition, I think this is a very opportune moment with millions of Americans out of work to put them back to work building green infrastructure like solar and wind power, like electric charging stations, like working on building efficiency, improving public transportation. There's so many things that could be done that, like FDR put millions of Americans back to work under the New Deal. A Green New Deal could also put millions of Americans back into good paying, hopefully union jobs for the future, and that would help the economic recovery, but also contribute to our green recovery. And I could talk about this for hours, so I'll just stop there for now.
Thank you so much. I thought I was unmuted and I was not. Thank you so much, me. I think that was a lot additional thoughts, and I think we really need to take those things into consideration. I agree with you that the timeline needs to be as aggressive as possible. Felicia, do you want to add on to this?
Yeah, I think those are all really great points, but another thing that could happen in Colorado that I think would be really feasible to get done in the next couple of years is creating education regarding social justice and climate change in schools from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. Climate change is embedded in every subject, whether it's learning basic sciences in elementary school or political theory in high school. It intersects with every aspect of our education, and it would be really influential and help educate a whole new generation if there were classes or areas of the curriculum in Colorado that directly addressed climate change and the way that sustainability and the changes in our environment affect people differently. And specifically, people of lower income that I think, like Sunny mentioned, are in the areas that are being polluted. They're more susceptible to COVID and things like that. It's really important to begin educating the youth in these subjects in order to help create a new generation of people who are going to advocate for change.
Thank you so much. I totally agree. Being also a student, I can relate to feeling like it's just not being made as much of a priority in schools as it should be. So now we'll move on to our next question. So kind of branching off from that.
I'm going to jump in and answer that question, but also tell Dawn to turn off her speakers so that we don't hear the feedback. Okay, so thank you, Talia, for an opportunity to cut in and answer this question just briefly. So I sit on the National Council for Environmental Legislators. I was sitting there at a conference in Los Angeles not that many years ago. And it was one of those conference rooms at the top of a hotel and all glass windows around you. And you could see the hills of Hollywood around you, sort of, because really what you could see was smog. Lots and lots and lots of smog. And that got me thinking, you know, part of the kind of phraseology that we use in the environmental realm is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So obviously we're trying to reduce the smog, but are we trying to reuse it? And is there a way to do so? So I started Googling furiously because I was like, man, if I could figure out how to reuse smog, I'm gonna be a gazillionaire, like for sure, like definitely, I'm gonna corner the market. Well, the answer is that there are certain parts of the country where they are reusing their smog. And it was the Netherlands, I believe, that have this big machine that's huge, that is kind of like a vacuum, that vacuums the particles out of the sky and then refines them into a material that they reuse it for jewelry and for all sorts of different items, creative items at this point primarily. And I don't know what the feasibility is, quite frankly. Obviously, it's not something that's quick and easy to do, or Elon Musk would have placed one on the roof of every one of our houses by now. But what I ideally would love to see is, imagine we are focused on our tall or wide business buildings. So think about 4-story buildings with long flat roofs, or downtown 17, 20-story buildings where we could put something approximately the size of a truck tire, not a truck tire, but approximately the size of a truck tire on the roof of your building that could suck in smog from the air. The questions obviously are huge. How many would we need to make any kind of an actual impact? How much can we take in? How much byproduct are we going to create? And is that byproduct going to be worse than the smog to begin with, right? So there are so many questions. But the reason that I wanted to do this town hall, and I see my friend Kat Haber is watching, and she is one of the leaders of TEDx Vail, and we're all working on a big TEDx event that's called Climate Countdown. And we're trying to figure out, you know, what are all of the things that are out there that we could do? And I know that Sunny and Felicia and Anita are on the forefront of figuring out all of those different ideas that are worth spreading. And this is not a TEDx event. This is my town hall, I promise you. But I can never separate ideas from legislation. We are all, they are one and the same. So please text us in with your ideas. Keep contacting Anita and Sunny and Felicia. We have so much more work to do. Now, Talia, it's your turn.
Yes. Hopefully, is my feedback good? Not screechy anymore? Okay, good. Sorry about that. And yes, thank you. We always appreciate engagement. So on to our next question. So what would you like to see happen at the local level or even the individual level to engage citizens about the concept of sustainability? So we can, this time we'll start with Felicia.
Awesome. Like I was mentioning before, I think education is super important. So I am a high schooler in DPS, and one of the requirements to graduate in DPS, in addition to English class, math, things like that, is a civics course that can either be a semester long or a year long in a government class. And I think that implementing a similar class and graduation requirement where the class would educate people around sustainability and social justice would be really beneficial. So the class would not only educate people on the ways our environment is polluted and how it happens and how water's connected and things like that, but also the ways that systemic racism changes who is affected by climate change and who will be affected by climate change in the future. Like I think Anita has said, we've already seen the effects of climate change with the wildfires right now. And anytime you go outside, I mean, it's not as bad today in Denver, but you can smell the smoke, and Colorado's in a drought right now. And though it takes individual collective action to make changes that are actually going to affect how the environment works and how long we have to save the planet. So by implementing this education in K through 12 schools, students can learn about it and then take it home to their families and say things like, hey, maybe we should not eat meat one day of the week. And when people start making those individual decisions and start working as a collective, it'll change how how the environment is being affected by our everyday actions.
Thank you, Felicia. I think those are some really good points. We'll just go backwards. Sunny, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I 100% agree with Felicia, and any part of any one of our campaigns, one of our first goals after researching the problem is educating the public. A lot of people live in their bubble. I'm here in downtown Denver, but there's people who live up in Commerce City, who live right next door to Suncor, and the issues that they're facing are dramatically different than the type of issues that myself in Denver face, or somebody, in Colorado Springs, who might be living next to a coal plant. And I think a lot of times living in that bubble, we're not aware of some of the issues or some of the problems that are faced by people, especially those living near oil and gas developments or near a chemical plant or near a coal plant. And I think letting people know what these other people are going through and how the climate crisis is affecting them opens our eyes to see that this is much more of a global issue. And on a local level, we need to take action, not just locally, but as individuals, to fix this problem, not just for ourselves, but also for our neighbors. Besides education and letting people know, this is what's going on and this is why we need to change it and this is why we need to act now as opposed to 10 years from now. Local governments are typically responsible for building codes and their public transit systems. And I think at a local level, local governments could require more energy efficiency in building and also help some of those individuals who are unable to pay for those kind of upgrades to help them to do that, and also to increase, use of solar panels on homes and buildings or green roofs like we have here in Denver, which was another campaign I worked on a couple of years ago. And also public transit options, more bike lanes, more electric buses or trains or light rail or whatever that might be. If people can get around using public transit without having to buy a car, it takes not only drastic tons of emissions out of the air, because it's one of the top contributors to greenhouse gases, but it also gives people a sense of financial independence, knowing that they can get somewhere and afford to get to work, to get to school or wherever they need to be without having to be relying upon a vehicle that may or may not break down, or they may or may not be able to afford, or the insurance that they may or may not be able to afford as well. And so those are just some of the very small things that could be done at a local level to really help improve not only economic and social access for people, but also improve climate conditions within the cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think those are a lot of good perspectives too. And then Mayor Pro Tem Seitz, go ahead.
Thank you, Talia. So there's a lot that I'd like to see happen at both the individual and the local level. I kind of already talked a little bit about the local level, but as Sunny was just mentioning, transportation is a huge sector as far as contribution to greenhouse gases. So for years and years, it was electricity generation that was, the primary source. And nationwide, I believe transportation has overtaken it, although in Colorado, it is still kind of neck and neck. But as Excel and some of our other major utilities are improving, taking the coal power plants offline, going to renewables, increasing that in their mix. We really are left with transportation as an area that we need to focus on. And if you look at graphs, energy generation, electricity generation has really done a good job becoming more efficient. There's still ways to go, but it's done a good job. We have not, even with clean car standards and other things, we have not seen that same level of success in transportation. And what success we've seen an open attack on at the federal level. And I think there's a third attack now, which is after the pandemic, how comfortable are people going to feel in transit? And so I think we really need to make sure that we do not lose the gains that we've seen in multimodal accessibility in transit because people's consumer choices change after a pandemic. So how do we make sure people feel safe and comfortable choosing the train or the bus to get to work? How do we make those viable options? So that's something that I think at a local level, making sure we're working on first, last mile connections, that we allow, maybe this is the year we focus more on bike paths so people feel comfortable getting there. For years and years, decades and decades, we have designed communities around a car. And so we've made it really difficult for people to feel safe when they choose other options. So right now, Westminster is entering in a study with Federal Heights and Adams County on Federal Boulevard. And we're putting safety at the forefront there in social equity. But the ultimate goal, if we're successful there, that is going to be a huge driver of mitigating GHG emissions on that corridor because it's mainly single cars right now. So it's kind of neat. That's why I was excited that this is about the environment, but you invited me to talk about sustainability because to me, it really, sustainability is so important. Equity is such an important piece and economy is such an important piece of it. So thank you for that. I mentioned the collaboration that we're doing on that corridor. I would like at the local level, while all of us are kind of hurting from this enormous loss of revenue, to really lean on regional collaboration, make sure that we partner together in areas we can. Let's not give up on our idea to electrify our fleet. Let's look for group purchasing discounts. Is there a way that we can share that with our residents? In Westminster, we subscribe to solar gardens for most of our municipal energy sources. So that's wonderful, and we're very happy. Is there a way to allow that for residents that live in multifamily, that they can't have their own solar panels? So looking for some options that maybe extend who can participate in some of these choices, these consumer choices, to make a bigger impact on our environment. I'm very curious to see what happens in Denver. They are going to have a ballot initiative asking for a sales tax increase to work on climate change. So we'll see. And I think Felicia's point and Sunny's point about education helps initiatives like this get passed. But ultimately, what I want on the individual level is a feeling of efficacy and advocacy. I want the community to hold our feet to the fire, to tell us that, yes, we need you to focus on core services, and focusing on the environment is a part of core services. It isn't an extra. It's the lens that we need to do when we're designing streets. How are we doing it in a way that is sustainable and environmentally friendly? When we're setting building codes, how are we doing that appropriately? When we're building parks, is it time to move away from Kentucky bluegrass? All of these decisions. So those are the things I'd like to see at both an individual and a local level. I know that we're all going through a hard time, but I do think that in challenges, we find opportunities. And I'm hoping that we will leverage those to rebuild into a more just and responsible vision of what we can be. So.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Very long-winded today, ladies. I'm sorry.
No worries at all. And then don't worry, I did not forget. Daphne, you can add your 2 cents now.
Yay. Well, first of all, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm allergic to Kentucky bluegrass, so let's get rid of it all. Terrible thing to be allergic to in the United States of America. So, we've heard about all of these major initiatives that we should be involved with and are involved with, and take not only the role of municipal government, but state government and community advocacy groups as well. But I want to ask you the question about what can you as an individual do, or rather, I'm going to answer the question of what can you as an individual do. So I sit next to State Representative Lisa Cutter on the floor. And one of Representative Cutter's major initiatives is zero waste. And she would like to see Colorado become a zero waste state. Now, if you're thinking, oh, that's absolutely nuts and crazy, I want you to know that New York City, New York State, the whole thing, New York has a zero waste initiative. And if New York can do it, we surely can do it. So let's think for a minute of what does that mean on your part. Some of the things that I've started doing is I take leftovers for lunch the next day, because food waste is a huge contributor to our problems with our environment. And you save money at the same time. So take your leftovers from dinner for lunch the next day, and maybe treat yourself to a coffee if you're feeling deprived because you didn't get something new for your afternoon meal. Take your utensils from your kitchen drawer, wrap them in a cloth napkin, and use your utensils and your cloth napkin for that leftover lunch that you hopefully brought in a Tupperware type container, so that you can reuse your utensils and your container for your lunch again the next day. These might seem, I don't know what they seem like, but what they are is simple. And we have to not forget that the simple is the most important. The other thing is reduce is that first word on the reduce, reuse, and recycle. And we focus so much on the recycle, we forget about the reduce. So where can you reduce? Reduce consumption, reduce use. So don't buy as many things. Don't buy as many clothes. Clothes are a big contributor to the problems in our environment. So try and look at your lifestyle and your choices and figure out where you might be able to make a different decision. And some of these are hard. Look, I buy things from Amazon. Amazon is under fire right now as a major contributor to problems with our environment, just from trucks and boxes and materials, packaging materials, not to mention questions about their workforce behaviors. And yet I have become very comfortable safely shopping from my telephone without ever having to step foot out of my house. So would it be better for me to don a mask and go down to the grocery store to get that item that I needed instead of ordering from Amazon? That's a question that you have to ask yourself. But take an inventory of how you interact all day. Take one day, pick one day and journal it. And every single time you do something that you're like, ooh, I could have done that differently, and my different choice would have been better for the environment, write that down. And as you start journaling and seeing what your habits are, if caring for the environment is important to you, you will find a number of ways that you on your own can make changes that can impact the environment. Now you're sitting there thinking, I'm one person. How is one person going to make a difference? Well, my friends, the answer is nothing has ever started without one person trying to make a difference.
Thank you so much. I think those are great opportunities that really anyone can use. We do have a question from the Facebook Live, so I'm just going to read that one out from Kat Haber. How might unlikely allies see it in their financial self-interest to be involved with the solutions? And how might policy alert fossil fuel execs to use their engineering prowess to help solve decarbonization? So that's a lot, but if anyone wants to jump in with a response, I'm just going to kind of open the floor to anyone who wants to share their response to that. Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Seitz, go for it.
So I live in a pretty purple community. I do not have the mandate that elected leaders in Boulder or Aspen have to work on climate. And the conversation that I often have within my own community and within my organization is really one of fiscal responsibility. So Boulder County actually did a study looking at the cost of climate change just on their road infrastructure. So roads, streets, bridges, and the cost of increased maintenance and repairs just due to climate change was astronomical. And I can provide Talia with the report if she would like to see it. And it isn't what you're thinking. It isn't just the culverts and the water diversions being, the wrong size because we're having 100-year floods at like 5-10-year increments. It wasn't that. It was the extended high heat days. So one thing that most people don't realize is we have different mixes for our roads, right? Depending, like Phoenix uses a different mix than Colorado. And so we have so many more high heat days that we're seeing. And this is an issue that nationally engineers are looking at, streets buckling, right? And cracking. And so there's all of this additional wear and tear. And so you're actually being fiscally irresponsible not to pay attention to it. As far as our water utility, forest fires cause an immense burden on treating water. So when you saw the massive fires a few years back near Fort Collins, that had a huge impact on their water system. And so by mitigating, right, so we want to mitigate these impacts. And so that direct action is actually saving the taxpayers dollars. And so, I know you were talking more about corporate America, but government can be a pretty slow boat to turn, and especially at a local level where you have a lot of institutionalized area experts, and then you have an elected body trying to give policy direction. There can be some internal pushback. But that has really been what I believe it's good, strong fiscal stewardship has been the only way I can communicate it to people who don't care as much about equity or disproportional social impacts of pollution, has been able to say, well, it's actually more a measure twice, cut once approach, instead of letting historical events be our guide for how we engineer this. Let's do some multi-scenario planning. So we're right sizing this for future. And so that's been very helpful. I think that people who are business minded understand that there are often disruptive forces in the market that change it completely. I think that the economic case for a green economy is proving itself out more and more frequently, right? The data is on our side. And I think that is going to assist us. I think the problem is windfall. I don't think that there's been, there's not the opportunity, there's not the Beverly Hills, the Beverly Hillbillies. There's not the equivalent of that quite yet on the green economy side. And I'm wondering if that holds it back because of that kind of American rags to riches dream. But I think we need to talk about the success story of the green economy in a way that is compelling. And that's important for so many reasons, just transitions, but also to get that confidence that it is okay to transition, that it is okay if we have a disruptive technology, if we do see certain industries not lead in Colorado the way they used to. So that's my answer. I know I've talked for a long time, but Representative Michelson Janae just touched on something that I care so deeply about, which is waste. And so I can't let it go by. During the pandemic, I am so worried that we are losing all of the momentum we got on going away from single-use plastics. Everyone wants to support our local businesses, and we're getting all of the styrofoam and all of the plastics and all of the waste associated with it. And so it's now better time than ever to try to get our local restaurants to have more sustainable choices for take home, right? And for us to really be mindful of our consumer choices and what they are doing to the environment. I think waste is going to be a huge battle in addition to transit post pandemic. We really need to think about what we're giving up by becoming dependent on single waste plastics again. That is an area I should have spoken that local governments can get involved, is really with improving solid waste in their community. Daphne is 100% correct. Food waste is a huge source. It's the number one source of anthropogenic methane, which is more than 10 times I guess, strong of a greenhouse gas. I'm sorry, words are failing me, than carbon dioxide is. So it's a huge waste, and we should be composting it, and we should be less wasteful as people. So I apologize. I know that's not part of the question, but I was like cheering you on when you brought up waste. So thank you.
No worries. I think that's a really good point that you brought up. I do want to open it up to any of our other speakers who want to touch on that question. And give your own response to it as well. Yeah, Sunny, go for it.
Let me remember to unmute myself first. Just sort of to echo some of the comments made by Anita and add to that. I don't want to repeat any of that, but some of the financial incentives also for transitioning to a green future include healthcare. And the US spends hundreds of billions of dollars a year on climate change related illnesses that have increased substantially and now are responsible for killing almost as many people as, which is just terrible. I was reading about a plant in Texas that closed. It was the number one emitter of mercury in the world. And when it closed, they saved billions of dollars a year in Medicare and Medicaid costs from that one plant alone. So that's another sort of financial incentive to clean our air, our transportation, as well as our agricultural systems. One of the other financial solutions is that the cleanest, cheapest form of energy out there right now is wind power. And solar is doing its very best to very quickly catch up to the price of wind, which is about half of what we pay in Colorado right now, at about 6 cents per kilowatt hour. And in Colorado, we're paying around 12 cents per kilowatt hour for energy. So it would save anybody who uses electricity, which is everybody, substantial, you could cut your electric bill in half every month. And so those are just some of the other financial incentives that come along with this. And I would also note that the question was asked about alluring fossil fuel execs to use their energy prowess to help solve our decarbonization. I think we have the solutions there. We have the ability to generate electricity without oil and gas. We have the ability to drive vehicles without oil and gas. We have the ability to create mass transit without the use of oil and gas. I think we have the ability to transition from industrial to regenerative agriculture. All of that technology exists now. It's just been difficult to implement. Mostly because of fossil fuel companies who are still awaiting a return on investment or an ROI on their natural gas plants that they built or their coal plants that they built. They don't want to stop using them until they've made enough money off of them, basically, to recoup the cost of building those, because it does take decades to recoup those costs. And the only last thing I wanted to add about zero waste was that there were two very wonderful bills that unfortunately got the COVID axe this year. One was to ban polystyrene or styrofoam, and the other was to ban single-use plastic bags and coffee stirrers and stuff this year. So hopefully we'll see those two bills reintroduced next year. Because the US, with 4% of the world's population, is the #1 producer of trash. And it would be nice to see that end. And thank you again.
Thank you so much. So we already are to the point where we want to have everyone give a chance or have a chance to give some final thoughts and statements. So we're just going to go through and you can say whatever final message, stories, anything, and make sure to include your biggest hope or wish for our future. Let's start off with Felicia.
I just want to thank you all for having me on. It was so fun to listen to everyone and learn from what you guys have to say. And I am really just going to, again, advocate for education in K-12 schools. This climate change is affecting youth, and it's going to affect us the most because we're the ones that are growing up and are dealing with these issues basically from our birth in a situation that we don't really have any, or at least we didn't have any control over. So giving that voice to youth is so important because we're here for the long run. We're going to be living our lives in a world where, I mean, hopefully we have water and there's food and access to things like that in the future. So educating our youth and the kids from 5 years old all the way through high school is going to be crucial in the next couple years. And yeah, I'm just so grateful that I was able to be here. So turn it over to someone else.
Thank you so much, Felicia. It's really inspiring to see other youth who are just as passionate about this issue. We'll hop over to Mayor Pro Tem Seitz.
Thank you, Talia. So I want to say really quickly a thank you to Felicia because I find myself completely heartened, excited, and relieved to hear an intelligent young woman like yourself talk about the importance of the environment and education and through K through 12. So thank you because you give me hope. That said, I'm not going to leave it to you to fix. I'm going to do everything I can in the power and in the position that I have right now to try to give you the future you deserve as much as we can work for it. And Sunny's working, we're all working from different angles and we may have slightly different takes on how to get there. But I think that there's opportunity now. So I know I've been a little bit negative and doom and gloom on this in regards to some of the things I'm afraid of that we've lost during the pandemic. I wanted to take a second to talk about some of the good things. Electricity generation was the lowest it has been in April for 30 years. In 2019, we used the least amount of carbon since coal, the least amount of coal since 1978. Things are moving in the right direction, but we can't become complacent. We have to keep pushing for more. And I'm really, I'm hopeful. We've seen the ability for lots of people who didn't think they could telecommute are telecommuting, right? We can see how quickly we can change our patterns, our behaviors, and our everyday when we're required to. So that's the silver lining of COVID is that we can come together and we can find solutions and we can do it quickly. And so I'm hoping that when it comes to our environment, when it comes to dealing with waste, when it comes to do with greenhouse gas emissions and building a more resilient community that can handle those extreme events, that we believe in ourselves, that we push ourselves and we take the responsible steps. Doesn't mean that we think everybody who's been working in those industries should just be out on their ear right now. I have to tell you, we need to focus on just transitions. We need to focus on equity in every single thing that we do that is environmental, because they're sides of the same coin, and we can't leave people behind. So thank you for having me on. This has been wonderful. You guys are great, and it's interesting to hear the different perspectives, voices, and passion.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the work you're doing, and I'm sure that the other panelists can say the same. Sunny, go take it away.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. And I do want to thank my other panelists. You're amazing people, and I'm so happy that you're doing the work that that you do, because we need everybody doing this, which is why I'm part of a grassroots movement. For the future, probably one of the first and most important things I'd like to see is I'd like to be able to walk out onto my balcony and be able to breathe the air. And that was sort of one of the other byproducts of the COVID shut-in, was that I could stand on my balcony for the first time in years and actually breathe in somewhat clean air. I would like to see that every day. I would like to have more days of clean air than days of air action alerts. And I would also like us to learn a lesson from this COVID pandemic and sort of emerge from it with a new goal of creating a just and sustainable economy that thrives off of saving our planet and solving the climate crisis. And for me, that would be the ultimate best goal out of all of this, but to see that actually come to fruition, not only at a local and state level, but also at a federal level. And so that's kind of my biggest hope for the future. I would like to see all of this social unrest sort of end as well, so that we could move forward and transition ourselves. And I think that would be the best ideal world, not only to live in, but also to leave for our children and our children's children and the 7 generations that I mentioned earlier. And again, just thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Sunny. We really appreciate you being here. And last but certainly not least, Daphna, wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem, Felicia, Sunny, and Talia, for this amazing conversation today. I just want to share a story with you. It's no surprise to anyone that my #1 issue is mental health, and specifically youth suicide and school safety. And I chaired the school safety interim committee last interim. And during the interim, I was meeting with all of the heads of safety for every single school district. And one of the district supervisors pulled me aside and he said, "Daphna, I want to tell you a story." And I said, "Okay." And he said, there was a group of scientists who got together and they were studying and they were trying to figure out, and they were trying to determine why would our children want to die? Why would life have lost meaning for our children? What have we done? And they, the way he told the story, they locked themselves into a room and they weren't going to come out until they had the decision. And so they come out of the room and he says, "Okay, so what is your answer?" And they said, "Climate change." And he said, "Excuse me?" And they said, "We are telling our children they have no future." That is wrong. Our children do have a future, because Mayor Pro Tem Seitz, because Sunny and Felicia are fighting like hell to make sure that our children have a future. I sit alongside and support these legislative efforts and these community-wide efforts and try to dream up as big of ideas as I possibly can. But we are forgetting, and Anita, I was so thrilled that you said, I know I was gloom and doom, but let me tell you the positive things. That you said the positive things. We can't forget to couch this in the positive. Yes, it's important that we have a sense of urgency. This is an urgent matter. And there was a question on Facebook about water. Oh my God, I cannot even think of a more urgent problem that we are facing in Colorado than water. Plain and simple. And no, there are no good answers to that question. And no, I'm not wrapping this up quickly so we don't have to answer it. I'm wrapping it up because we're at an hour. And we should have our whole own town hall on water, Talia, if you'll make a note of that, and we will do that. But what we have to remember is to tell our children that there is a beautiful and brilliant future in front of them. And together with them, together with Felicia, together with our children, we get to build it. This isn't a problem. This is an opportunity. And you have to decide that you want in on this action early, because we all have to play our part, and there is a role for each and every one of us. But that shouldn't slow you down. Don't throw away your shot. I know we've all seen Hamilton at this point. Don't throw away our kids' shot, or their kids' shot, or all 7 generations' shot. Every single one of us has a role to play, and we get to play it in the way that we know best. So figure out what you like to do, and then figure out how it can help the environment. And when you talk to our children, for crying out loud, please tell them there is a future and it is beautiful, and we are all in it together. Thanks for spending another Sunday afternoon with me. We'll be here next week at 3 o'clock, and I hope you'll join us. Goodbye, everybody.